A few years have passed since everything happened. If someone had told me back then that I would find peace, I would not have believed them. For a long time, I thought success meant proving people wrong. I thought it meant showing my family what they had missed. I thought it meant making them regret every decision they made. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons. And eventually, I learned something important. The people who hurt me were no longer controlling my future. I was. The family gatherings slowly became different. Not perfect, just different. My mother stopped comparing me to Jessica. She started asking about my work. At first, it felt strange, almost uncomfortable. I wasn't used to being seen. I wasn't used to people listening when I spoke. But I also understood something. A few kind words could not erase years of pain. So I kept healthy boundaries. I answered phone calls. I visited on holidays. I was polite, but I no longer chased anyone's approval. That chapter of my life was over. Meanwhile, my company continued to grow, quietly. No big announcements, no flashy social media posts, no expensive celebrations, just hard work. The same kind of work I had been doing for years. One day I received an unexpected email. A well-known millionaire entrepreneur wanted to meet me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why would someone like that know my name? But it was real. He had followed my company's progress. He admired what we had built. A few weeks later, we sat across from each other in a conference room. He offered partnership opportunities, new projects, new investments, new doors. Years earlier, I would have been shocked. Now I simply smiled. Not because of the money, because I finally understood my value. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough. I already knew. As the business grew, I started helping young artists and small business owners. Many of them reminded me of myself. Talented, hardworking, but overlooked. Some only needed advice. Others needed encouragement. A few simply needed someone to believe in them. I tried to be that person, because I knew what it felt like when nobody did. Then something happened that I never expected. Jessica called me. Her voice sounded different, quieter, older somehow. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I had waited years to hear. "I'm sorry." Not an excuse, not a justification, not another argument, just an apology, a real one. She admitted the ways she had treated me. She admitted things had not always been fair. I listened. And when she finished, I thanked her. That was all. Because forgiveness doesn't always need a big speech. Sometimes it is simply letting go. When the call ended, I sat alone for a long time, thinking about everything, the hurt, the loneliness, the rejection, the years spent trying to prove myself. And that's when I finally understood. Success was never revenge. Success was peace. Success was waking up without anger. Success was building a life I loved. Success was no longer carrying the weight of old wounds. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. And if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever worked hard while others received the credit, this story is for you. After Jessica's apology, I expected to feel different. I thought maybe years of hurt would disappear overnight. But healing doesn't work that way. The next morning, I woke up feeling exactly the same. The memories were still there. The difficult years were still there. The difference was that they no longer controlled me. That was something I had spent years learning. A few months later, my mother invited me to dinner. In the past, I would have spent days wondering what to wear, what to say, how to make her proud. This time was different. I simply showed up as myself, nothing more, nothing less. During dinner, she asked questions about my company, real questions. Not the kind people ask to be polite, the kind they ask because they actually care. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't used to it. Then she surprised me even more. She admitted she had made mistakes. Not all of them, not yet, but some. And honestly, that was enough. People do not change overnight. Sometimes growth happens one small step at a time. I learned to accept that. Meanwhile, the company continued growing. Our team became larger. Our projects became bigger. But the thing that made me happiest wasn't the money. It was watching other people succeed. One afternoon, a young artist walked into my office. She reminded me of myself years earlier. Nervous, talented, unsure of her own value. She showed me her work. It was incredible. But she kept apologizing, kept pointing out flaws, kept explaining why she wasn't good enough. I listened quietly. Then I told her something I wish someone had told me years ago. You don't need permission to believe in yourself. She started crying, and so did I. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood how far I had come. Years ago, I was that girl, the one waiting for approval, the one hoping someone would choose her, the one trying to earn love. Now I was helping someone else see their worth. And that felt better than any business deal, better than any award, better than any amount of money. A few weeks later, the millionaire investor called again. This time, he invited me to speak at an event. There were hundreds of people in the audience, business owners, artists, entrepreneurs, dreamers. Standing on that stage, I thought about the younger version of myself, the girl who felt invisible, the girl who sat quietly while everyone praised someone else. If she could see me now, she wouldn't believe it. But maybe that's the point. Life doesn't always become easier. Sometimes you simply become stronger. And standing there, looking out at that crowd, I realized something else. The greatest achievement wasn't building a successful company. It wasn't earning respect. It wasn't proving anyone wrong. It was finally feeling at peace with who I was. And for the first time in my life, that peace felt permanent. But there was still one conversation I never expected to have. And it would change the way I saw my entire family forever. The conversation happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I wasn't expecting it. My phone rang while I was working from home. When I saw my mother's name on the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. Not because I was angry, I simply wasn't used to hearing from her. Eventually, I answered. Her voice sounded nervous. That alone surprised me. Growing up, my mother always seemed certain of her opinions, certain of her decisions, certain that Jessica deserved more attention than I did. But this sounded different. After a few minutes of small talk, she became quiet. Then she said something I never thought I would hear. "Emma, I need to tell you something." I waited. My heart was suddenly beating faster. Then she took a deep breath. "For years, I thought I was helping Jessica." Another pause. "But I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I wasn't prepared for that conversation. Part of me had imagined it many times. But when it finally happened, it felt strange, almost unreal. My mother continued speaking. She admitted that she had always worried about Jessica more. Jessica was louder, more demanding, more emotional. Whenever she wanted attention, she found a way to get it. I was different. I stayed quiet. I handled problems on my own. I rarely complained. Because of that, my mother assumed I didn't need as much support. But she was wrong, very wrong. The truth is, she said softly, you needed us too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, and suddenly I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not sadness, just relief. A small piece of weight I had carried for years seemed to disappear. Not all of it, just enough. That conversation didn't erase my childhood. It didn't change the past, but it helped me stop questioning myself. For so many years, I wondered if I was imagining things, if maybe I had been too sensitive, if maybe the favoritism wasn't real. Now I finally had my answer. It was real, and someone else finally admitted it. A few weeks later, I received another surprise. The young artist I had mentored called me. She had just signed her first major contract. I could hear the excitement in her voice. She kept thanking me over and over. I laughed and told her she had done all the hard work herself. But after we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time, because her success meant more to me than she realized. Years ago, nobody opened doors for me. Nobody told me I was capable. Nobody reminded me that my dreams mattered. I had to learn those lessons alone. Now I had the chance to make someone else's journey easier. And that felt like a gift. The funny thing is, the more successful I became, the less interested I was in proving anything. The mansion didn't matter anymore. The inheritance didn't matter anymore. Even Jessica's success didn't matter. For years, I thought winning meant being chosen, being praised, being recognized, but now I understood something different. Winning was waking up happy. Winning was having peace. Winning was looking in the mirror and liking the person staring back. And as my life continued moving forward, something unexpected happened. Jessica reached out again, but this time she wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because she needed help. And what she told me next changed everything. When Jessica called that evening, I immediately knew something was wrong. Her voice was different, not confident, not demanding, not like the sister I had known most of my life. She sounded tired. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she finally spoke. "Emma, I don't really know who else to call." I sat quietly, waiting. Over the years, I had imagined many conversations with Jessica. Arguments, confrontations, moments where I finally told her everything I felt. But this wasn't any of those. This felt different, more human, more honest. Jessica explained that things weren't going well. From the outside, her life still looked perfect. The beautiful house, the expensive car, the successful image. But appearances can be misleading. I knew that better than anyone. The truth was that she was struggling. Some business decisions had gone badly. Several partnerships had fallen apart. The pressure was becoming overwhelming. For the first time in her life, she admitted she didn't have all the answers. I listened carefully, not because I wanted to fix everything, and not because I felt responsible. I listened because she was my sister. That didn't erase the past, but it still mattered. When she finished talking, there was a long silence. Then she asked something I never expected. "How did you do it?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "How did you keep going when nobody believed in you?" The question hit me harder than I expected, because for years I had assumed Jessica never noticed, never saw my struggles, never understood what life felt like from my side. But maybe she had. Maybe she just never knew how to say it. I took a deep breath. Then I answered honestly. I stopped waiting for other people to believe in me. Silence. I learned to believe in myself first. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I heard her crying, quietly, almost trying to hide it. And in that moment, I realized something important. Jessica wasn't the villain I had imagined for so many years. She had benefited from the favoritism. That was true. She had made mistakes, many mistakes. That was also true. But she was carrying her own pain, her own fears, her own insecurities. I could hear it in her voice. For the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, not as my rival, just as another imperfect person trying to figure life out. That realization changed something inside me, not overnight, but enough. Over the following months, our relationship slowly improved, carefully. One conversation at a time. We didn't pretend the past never happened. We didn't suddenly become best friends. Real healing doesn't work that way. Instead, we built something new, something honest, something healthier. Meanwhile, life continued moving forward. My company kept growing. The partnership opportunities expanded. New investors reached out. New projects appeared. But strangely, none of those things felt as important as they once would have, because the biggest changes weren't happening in my business. They were happening inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anger everywhere I went. And that freedom was worth more than any amount of money. But what happened a few months later would show me just how much my life had truly changed. And it started with a young woman walking into my office with tears in her eyes. The young woman looked nervous as she sat across from me. She couldn't have been older than 22. Her hands shook slightly as she held a portfolio against her chest. I remembered that feeling, the fear of being judged, the fear of hearing no, the fear of believing in yourself and being disappointed. I had felt all of those things before. She introduced herself and showed me her artwork. It was beautiful, not perfect, but real, the kind of work that made people feel something. As we talked, I noticed she kept apologizing. She apologized for taking my time. She apologized for asking questions. She even apologized for sharing her dreams. Eventually, I stopped her. "You don't have to apologize for existing," I said gently. The room became quiet. I could see tears forming in her eyes. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. Her family didn't support her. They thought her dreams were unrealistic. They compared her to other people constantly. Nothing she did ever seemed good enough. As she spoke, I felt something inside me tighten, because I knew exactly what she meant. For a moment, it felt like I was listening to a younger version of myself. Years ago, I had sat in rooms, wondering why I wasn't enough, wondering why someone else always seemed more important, wondering what was wrong with me. Now I finally knew the answer. Nothing was wrong with me, and nothing was wrong with her either. Before she left, I gave her some advice, not business advice, life advice. Don't spend your life trying to convince people to see your value. She looked at me carefully. Then I continued, the people who truly matter will see it on their own. She smiled through her tears, and for some reason, that moment stayed with me for weeks, because I realized how many years I had wasted doing exactly that, trying to earn approval, trying to be chosen, trying to prove I deserved love. The truth was simple. Love shouldn't have to be earned. Respect shouldn't have to be begged for. And self-worth should never depend on someone else's opinion. Around that same time, the investor who had partnered with my company invited me to another event. This one was different, smaller, more personal. After the meeting ended, he pulled me aside. He wanted to discuss a much larger opportunity, a partnership that could expand my company nationwide. A few years earlier, news like that would have overwhelmed me. But now I felt calm, excited, yes, grateful, absolutely, but calm. Because whether the deal happened or not, my happiness no longer depended on achievements. That was new for me, and honestly, it felt wonderful. Meanwhile, my family continued changing in small ways. My mother called more often, not to criticize, not to compare, just to talk. Jessica checked in occasionally too, sometimes about work, sometimes about life. Our conversations were still careful, still new, but they were real, and that mattered. One evening, Jessica invited me for coffee. I almost said no. Old habits die hard, but something told me to go. When I arrived, she looked nervous, much more nervous than I had ever seen her. After a few minutes, she looked down at her coffee cup. Then she said something that completely caught me off guard. "There are things you don't know about our childhood." I stared at her, confused. For years, I thought I understood everything. I thought I knew exactly what had happened. But judging by the look on Jessica's face, there was a truth I had never heard before. And what she told me next would change the way I remembered our entire family. I stared at Jessica across the coffee shop table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise around us seemed to disappear. All I could focus on was the look on her face. She looked nervous, almost afraid. I had never seen my sister look that way before. Finally, she took a deep breath. Then she began talking. "When we were kids, I was jealous of you." I blinked. Of all the things I expected to hear, that was not one of them. Jealous. The word didn't make sense. Not after everything that had happened. Not after years of watching her receive attention I could only dream about. Jessica gave a small, sad smile. I know that sounds crazy. Honestly, it did. But I stayed quiet and listened. She looked down at her coffee. Then she continued, "You thought Mom and Dad loved me more." I didn't respond because that part was hard to deny. Jessica nodded slowly. "I know it looked that way." Another pause. "But what you didn't see was the pressure." I frowned slightly. She explained that from a very young age, everyone expected her to be perfect. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect choices. Whenever she succeeded, people expected even more. Whenever she failed, they acted disappointed. She felt trapped, like she was playing a role she couldn't escape. For years, she thought I was lucky. Lucky because I seemed free. Lucky because I didn't carry the same expectations. Lucky because I appeared stronger. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. We had spent our entire childhood wanting each other's life. I wanted the attention she received. She wanted the freedom she thought I had. Neither of us understood the other's pain. Not fully, not back then. The realization was strange. For so many years, I had viewed our story as simple. One sister won, one sister lost, one sister was loved, one sister was ignored. But life is rarely that simple. People carry struggles we cannot see. Even the people we think have everything. Jessica wiped her eyes. Then she admitted something else. There were times I knew things weren't fair. I looked at her. She looked away. I should have said something. The words came quietly, almost as if she had been carrying them for years. I didn't. That honesty mattered, not because it changed the past, but because it was real. For the first time, neither of us was pretending. Neither of us was hiding. We were simply two sisters talking honestly. Maybe for the first time in our lives. When we left the coffee shop, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking, reflecting, trying to process everything. And slowly I realized something. Healing isn't about deciding who was right. Healing isn't about keeping score. It's about understanding. It's about seeing people clearly, the good and the bad, the strengths and the flaws. And once you do that, something changes. The anger begins to lose its power. A few weeks later, another major opportunity arrived. The nationwide partnership moved forward. Investors were interested. Expansion plans were taking shape. My team was excited. Everyone was celebrating. But strangely, my mind kept returning to that conversation with Jessica. Because while the business success felt wonderful, something else felt even better. Peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't depend on money, or recognition, or winning. And that's when I received a letter that would become one of the most meaningful things anyone had ever given me. The sender's name made me smile immediately. It was from the young artist I had mentored, but I had no idea what her words were about to teach me. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. At first, I almost overlooked it. My desk was covered with paperwork, contracts, and project plans. The company was growing faster than ever. There always seemed to be another meeting waiting, another decision to make, another email to answer. But something about the envelope caught my attention. The handwriting looked familiar. I smiled the moment I saw the name. It was from the young artist I had mentored. The same young woman who had walked into my office months earlier with tears in her eyes. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. In today's world, people rarely write letters anymore. Maybe that's why it felt so special. I started reading, and before I reached the second page, my eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears, grateful ones. She wrote about her journey, about the fears she had carried, about the opportunities she had almost refused because she didn't believe in herself. Then she wrote something that stopped me completely. She said I had changed her life. I read that sentence 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because it was difficult to accept. For so many years, I had focused on everything I lacked, everything I didn't receive, everything I thought I needed. Now someone was telling me that my experience had helped them find confidence, that my struggles had meaning, that my pain had not been wasted. I sat quietly for a long time after finishing the letter, looking out the window, thinking about life, thinking about how strange the journey had been. Years ago, I wanted people to notice me, to validate me, to tell me I mattered. Now I realized something unexpected. The moments that mattered most weren't the ones where I received recognition. They were the moments where I helped someone else believe in themselves. That realization stayed with me, and as the weeks passed, I found myself spending more time mentoring, more time listening, more time encouraging people who felt invisible, people who reminded me of the person I used to be. One afternoon, after speaking at a small business event, a young man approached me. He looked nervous, very nervous. He told me he had been following my journey for years. Then he asked a question that caught me off guard. How do you stop caring what people think? I laughed softly, not because the question was funny, because I had spent most of my life asking the same thing. For a moment, I thought carefully. Then I answered honestly. I don't think you ever completely stop caring. He looked surprised. I continued, you just stop letting it control your decisions. He nodded slowly, as if the answer made sense. And maybe it did, because confidence isn't about becoming fearless. It's about moving forward anyway, even when you're afraid, even when people doubt you, even when nobody is cheering for you. That evening, as I drove home, I realized how different my life felt now. Not easier, not perfect, just lighter. The old anger was fading. The old need for approval was fading too. In its place was something much stronger, self-respect, and that changed everything. A few days later, I received another phone call. This time, it wasn't from a business partner, or an investor, or a client. It was from Jessica, and the emotion in her voice told me immediately that something important had happened. Something she had been waiting years to say. Something neither of us would ever forget. The moment I answered Jessica's call, I knew something was different. Her voice sounded emotional, not upset, not angry, just emotional. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing. Then she finally spoke. Emma, there's something I've wanted to tell you for years. I sat down slowly. My heart was beating faster than usual. Over the past few years, Jessica and I had rebuilt parts of our relationship, carefully, patiently, one conversation at a time. But something about this felt bigger, more important. I waited quietly. Then she said the words, I spent most of my life competing with you. I frowned. Competing? The word surprised me. Jessica let out a small laugh, a sad one. I know it sounds ridiculous. Maybe it did. But I didn't interrupt. She continued. Everyone always compared us. That part was true. People compared our grades, our personalities, our careers, even the way we dressed. Growing up, it seemed normal. But looking back, it wasn't healthy at all. Jessica explained that over time, she started seeing me as competition, not because I did anything wrong, but because she felt pressured to stay ahead, to stay special, to stay worthy of the attention she received. The more she talked, the more I understood. She wasn't trying to excuse her behavior. She wasn't avoiding responsibility. She was finally being honest, and honesty changes everything. Then she said something that made me completely speechless. You were stronger than me. I almost laughed. For years, I had believed the exact opposite. I told her that. Jessica sighed. No, Emma. Her voice was firm. When things got hard, you kept going. When people overlooked you, you kept going. When nobody supported your dreams, you kept going. She paused. I don't know if I could have done that. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stared out the window, watching the evening sun disappear behind the buildings. And suddenly I remembered something. All those years I spent wishing I had Jessica's life. All those years I believed she had everything. Meanwhile, she had been looking at my life and seeing strength. Life is strange that way. Sometimes we spend years wanting what someone else has. Without realizing, they may be wishing for something we already possess. The conversation lasted almost 2 hours. By the time it ended, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, not because the past disappeared, but because the truth no longer felt hidden. Everything was finally out in the open. And for the first time, I felt like Jessica and I were seeing each other clearly. Not as rivals, not as competitors, just as sisters. A few weeks later, our family gathered for dinner. Nothing special, just a normal evening. But as I looked around the table, I noticed something. The atmosphere felt different. My mother laughed more. Jessica listened more. People interrupted less, compared less, judged less. The old patterns weren't completely gone. Maybe they never would be, but they were changing, slowly. And honestly, that was enough. Because healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes healing is simply choosing to do better tomorrow than you did yesterday. That night, after everyone went home, I sat alone on my porch, thinking about everything that had happened, the rejection, the heartbreak, the years of feeling invisible, the success, the forgiveness, the peace. And that's when I received an email that would bring this entire journey full circle. The sender's name immediately made me smile. It was from someone whose life had changed because of a conversation we once shared. And what they wrote reminded me of a lesson I would never forget. I opened the email late that evening. The sender was the young artist I had met almost 2 years earlier. The same woman who had walked into my office carrying a portfolio and a lifetime of self-doubt. I smiled before I even started reading. Then I opened the message. The first few lines were simple. She wanted to share some good news. Her business was growing. She had hired her first employee. Several of her projects had been featured in major publications. And for the first time, she was earning enough money to support herself doing what she loved. I felt genuinely happy for her, but it was the next part that stayed with me. She wrote that she had recently started mentoring younger artists, people who reminded her of herself, people who needed encouragement, people who were struggling to believe in their own potential. Then she wrote something that made me stop reading for a moment. "You taught me something I never forgot." I leaned back in my chair, curious. The sentence that followed hit me harder than I expected. "You showed me that confidence isn't something people give you, it's something you build." I stared at those words for a long time, because they were true, not just for her, for me too. The funny thing is, nobody had ever taught me that lesson directly. I learned it through disappointment, through rejection, through years of feeling overlooked. At the time, those experiences felt unfair, painful, even cruel. But looking back, they forced me to develop something stronger than approval. They forced me to develop belief in myself. And once you have that, everything changes. A few days later, I attended another business event. The investor, who had become both a mentor and friend, introduced me to several influential people. Years ago, those situations would have intimidated me. I would have worried about saying the wrong thing, about not being impressive enough, about not belonging in the room, but those thoughts rarely visited me anymore. Not because I had become perfect, because I finally understood my worth. That understanding created a kind of quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not ego, just confidence. The kind that doesn't need attention, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that stays with you even when nobody is watching. Later that evening, the investor asked me a question, one simple question. "What are you most proud of?" At first, I thought about the company, the partnerships, the opportunities, the financial success. But none of those answers felt right. So I told him the truth. "I'm proud that I didn't become bitter." He smiled, and honestly, I think he understood exactly what I meant. Because bitterness would have been easy. After everything that happened, nobody would have blamed me. But bitterness is heavy. It follows you everywhere. It steals your energy, your peace, your future. At some point, I decided I didn't want to carry it anymore, and letting it go turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. That night, as I drove home, I thought about my life, the family struggles, the years of comparison, the feeling of always coming second. And then I thought about where I was now, not just financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. For the first time, I truly felt free. But life still had one final lesson waiting for me. A lesson that would arrive in the form of a simple conversation with my mother. A conversation neither of us expected, and one that would finally bring this long chapter of our lives to a close. The investor who had believed in me from the beginning became one of my closest advisors. Yet the things that brought me the most joy were much simpler. Helping someone believe in themselves, watching a young artist sell their first piece of work, seeing a small business owner take their first big step. Those moments stayed with me longer than any business achievement ever could. One afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a local event for young entrepreneurs. Normally, I would have sent someone from my team. My schedule was full. The company was growing faster than ever. There were meetings, projects, and partnership opportunities waiting for my attention. But something about this event felt important, so I accepted. When I arrived, the room was filled with people from all different backgrounds. Some were artists, some were students, some had small businesses they were trying to grow. Others were simply searching for direction. As I stood on the stage, I looked around the room and saw something familiar. Uncertainty, doubt, fear. I recognized those feelings immediately, because years ago, I carried them every single day. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about money. I didn't talk about success. I didn't talk about awards or business growth. Instead, I told them the truth. I told them about rejection. I told them about being overlooked. I told them about spending years trying to prove my worth. The room became completely silent. People listened carefully. Some nodded. Some looked emotional. Because deep down, many of us carry the same fears. The fear that we are not enough. The fear that nobody sees our effort. The fear that we will never become what we hope to become. Then I shared the lesson that changed my life. Your value doesn't increase when someone finally notices you. The room remained silent. It was already there. I could see people writing those words down. And honestly, I wished someone had told me that years earlier. Maybe it would have saved me a lot of pain. After the event ended, dozens of people came to talk with me. One young woman stood out. She looked nervous, almost exactly the way I used to look. She thanked me for being honest. Then she admitted something. She had spent years comparing herself to her older sister. No matter what she achieved, she always felt second best. Hearing that stopped me for a moment, because it sounded so familiar. I smiled and told her something I wished someone had told me long ago. You don't need to win against someone else to have a good life. Tears filled her eyes, and at that moment, I realized just how far I had come. Years ago, I needed those words. Now I was passing them on. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. As I drove home that evening, I felt grateful. Not because my life was perfect, not because every wound had disappeared, but because I had finally stopped carrying the weight of old expectations. For so many years, I believed success would heal everything. I believed achievement would fill every empty space. I believed proving people wrong would bring peace. I was wrong. Peace arrived when I stopped trying to prove anything at all. And that realization would lead to one of the most important conversations of my entire life. For a long time, I thought success had a very specific look. I thought it was money, recognition, awards, titles, the kind of things people point to and admire. And don't get me wrong, those things can be wonderful. They can create opportunities. They can make life easier. But somewhere along the way, I learned they aren't the whole story. In fact, some of the happiest moments of my life had nothing to do with business at all. One of those moments happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was leaving the office when I received a message from one of the young entrepreneurs I had been mentoring. She wanted to meet, nothing urgent, just coffee. A few hours later, we were sitting together in a small cafe. She looked happy, confident, completely different from the nervous person I had first met. As we talked, she told me her business was doing well. Not perfect, not huge, but stable. She was proud of what she had built, and honestly, I was proud of her too. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You know what's funny?" I smiled. "What?" She laughed softly. "A few years ago, I thought success would make me happy." I nodded, because I knew exactly where this was going. "And now?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair. "I'm already happy." The words were simple, but they carried so much wisdom, because that was the lesson I had spent years learning. Happiness cannot always wait for the next achievement, the next promotion, the next milestone, the next victory. If it does, it never arrives. There will always be another goal, another challenge, another mountain to climb. At some point, we have to learn how to enjoy where we are. That realization changed my life. It allowed me to appreciate things I once overlooked. Quiet mornings, conversations with people I love, watching someone grow, helping someone succeed. The simple things became valuable. Around the same time, my company reached another major milestone. The nationwide expansion was officially complete. The partnerships had exceeded expectations. The investor who had first believed in me congratulated the entire team. Everyone celebrated. Everyone was excited. And I was grateful, very grateful. But something surprised me. The feeling wasn't as overwhelming as I expected. A few years earlier, I would have viewed this as the finish line. Proof that I had finally made it. Proof that I was successful. Proof that everyone who doubted me was wrong. But now I saw it differently. Success wasn't a destination. It was a process. It was becoming someone I could respect. Someone who stayed kind after being hurt. Someone who remained hopeful after disappointment. Someone who refused to become bitter. That mattered far more than any business achievement. As the months passed, my relationship with my family continued improving, slowly, naturally. No dramatic transformations, no perfect endings, just people trying to do better. Jessica and I talked more often. My mother became more thoughtful. There were still difficult moments. There always will be. Families are complicated. But the difference was that I no longer expected perfection. And because of that, I appreciated progress. That was enough. One evening, as I sat alone on my porch watching the sunset, I found myself thinking about the younger version of me, the girl who spent years trying to earn approval, the girl who believed she wasn't enough, the girl who felt invisible. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her something important, something I wish I had learned much sooner. And that lesson would become the final piece of this entire journey. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the last colors of the sunset fade into the sky, I thought about the person I used to be. Not the business owner, not the mentor, not the woman people now called successful. I thought about the young girl who spent years feeling invisible. The girl who always seemed to come second. The girl who believed love had to be earned. For a long time, she carried a heavy burden. She believed that if she worked harder, people would finally notice. If she achieved more, people would finally appreciate her. If she became successful enough, everyone would finally understand her value. But life taught me something very different. Your value does not begin when other people recognize it. Your value exists whether they see it or not. That lesson took me years to learn, and honestly, it changed everything. These days, my life looks very different than it once did. My company continues to grow. The partnership opportunities continue to expand. The investor who once opened a door for me has become a trusted friend. New opportunities still arrive. New challenges still appear. But none of those things define me anymore. They're part of my life, not my identity. The things that matter most are much simpler. A phone call with my mother, a conversation with Jessica, a young artist finding confidence, a small business owner taking a chance on themselves. Those moments mean more to me than any achievement ever could. The funny thing is, after I stopped trying to prove myself, people started seeing me differently. Family members who once overlooked me began asking for my advice. People who rarely listened suddenly paid attention. Old assumptions disappeared. Respect appeared where it had been missing before. But by then, something had changed. I no longer needed it. And that was the real victory. Because needing approval gives other people power over your happiness. When you stop needing it, you become free. That doesn't mean I stopped loving my family. Quite the opposite. In many ways, our relationships became healthier. Healthier because they were based on honesty instead of expectations. Healthier because I learned how to set boundaries. Healthier because everyone finally started taking responsibility for their actions. No family is perfect. Mine certainly isn't. But perfection was never the goal. Peace was. And little by little, we found it. A few months ago, Jessica and I were sitting together at a family gathering. At one point, she smiled and said something that made me laugh. "You know, I used to think you were the lucky one." I laughed, because years ago I thought exactly the same thing about her. That's the strange thing about life. We often assume other people have everything figured out. We imagine they have what we're missing. Meanwhile, they're looking at us, thinking the same thing. That realization made me grateful. Grateful for the lessons. Grateful for the struggles. Even grateful for some of the painful experiences. Because without them, I might never have become the person I am today. And if there is one thing I hope people take away from my story, it's this. Sometimes people only see your value after you stop trying to prove it. The moment you stop chasing approval is often the moment you find peace. The moment you stop competing is often the moment you begin growing. The moment you stop asking others to choose you is often the moment you finally choose yourself. And that changes everything. So if you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever wondered whether your efforts mattered, please remember this. Your worth is not determined by who notices you. Your worth is not determined by who praises you. and your worth is not determined by who chooses someone else. You are valuable long before anyone else realizes it. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I am grateful I learned it, because in the end, success was never revenge. Success was peace. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story is for you. This completes the story with the emotional closure, family healing, personal growth, and final message you wanted while keeping the tone realistic, reflective, and satisfying.